Lost in the mists of time, the arrival of Akkadians in central Mesopotamia remains a mystery. Yet, by 2300 BCE, they stood predominant, stretching their influence along the great rivers near modern Baghdad. At the heart of this transformation was Sargon, the Akkadian king who dominated from around 2334 to 2279 BCE. Sargon revolutionized the political landscape, achieving the first known centralization of power in the region. Where once loyalty belonged to local villages and their civic traditions, Sargon forged a new identity, which was showing loyalty to a singular ruler. Sargon systematically diminished the influence of local chieftains. He replaced fragmented loyalties with one unifying authority. A striking testament to this shift can be seen in a remarkable statue discovered in Nineveh. This statue has bold features like the intricately braided beard and the powerful bearing. All of these features were speaking to a new, commanding vision of kingship. The expressive mouth and stone-inlaid eyes suggest that the ruler was both dynamic and forceful. This statue shows a stark contrast to the serene figures of earlier Sumerian art. Sargon's capital, Akkad, stood proudly on the Euphrates River, which was about 30 kilometers south of present-day Baghdad. It was an epicenter from which a new era of empire was born. By 2150 BCE, the Akkadian dynasty crumbled under the assault of tribes, which were coming from the northeast mountains. The raiders from these tribes plundered the fertile plains. But they didn't leave anything of their own behind. In this chaos, Mesopotamia's fate shifted southward and moved it towards the resilient kingdoms of ancient Sumer. The Sumerians rose to the challenge. They repelled the invaders and reunited the lands under the powerful kings of Ur. They inaugurated the Third Dynasty, which flourished from 2112 to 2004 BCE. These rulers, instead of being successors to Sargon's innovations, saw kingship in a different light. To them, royal power was not absolute, but a divine favor. They believed that this royal power was bestowed by the gods upon a single city for a fleeting moment in time. There was no concept of a unified nation as we know it today. Each king reigned as a sacred steward, entrusted with the welfare of his people. The true heartbeat of the city, however, pulsed from its temples. These temples owned vast tracts of land, and the priests of these temples directed the city's labor. It was the priests who managed the intricate network of irrigation canals and ditches, which helped in sustaining agriculture, economy, and life itself. In this unique theocratic system, where religious figures or religious laws are in control. Every citizen, from slave to priest, worked in service of the sacred city-state. The political system of ancient Sumer was very much similar to a theocratic socialism. Everyone, from slaves to priests, worked together for the good of the city or state, in the belief that they are under the watchful eyes of the gods. At the top of the hierarchy of gods, first was Anu, the chief god. Below him was Enlil, the powerful god of earth and storms, and then comes Ea, the wise god of water, which was once worshipped in the ancient city of Eridu. And after Ea, there was the moon god, also known as Nana. He was once the ruler of Ur. It is believed that he measured time and brought fertility to the land. Each major city had its own patron deity. While smaller towns, they were protected by lesser gods and goddesses. In fact, it was believed that there were over 3,000 gods and demons, which were watching over every part of life, which includes even the smallest things, like pickaxes and brick molds. They were known to have spirits attached to them. The pantheon was flexible. Minor gods could rise or fade away, their names and roles often changing over time. Some gods were shared between cities, while others belonged to local cults. The Sumerians believed that the gods gathered in a grand assembly to make decisions, with the lesser gods bound to follow the will of the greater ones. The temple was not just a place for worship. It was believed to be the actual home of the god to which that temple belongs. Priests used to work there. Performing rituals and interpreting omens was part of their routine jobs. These rituals and interpretation were believed to reveal the god's will. These omens shaped every part of life, from farming to warfare. This made temple the true center of Sumerian society. Mesopotamian religion was filled with superstitions and strict ritual practices. People believed that life after death was a sad and miserable existence. The dead were seen as restless and sometimes even hostile toward the living. Because of this, there were many detailed rituals which were used to appease the spirits of the dead. But burial architecture itself was rare. In Mesopotamia, a person's relationship with the gods was not based on future rewards. Instead, it was dependent on how well they fulfilled their duties here and now, and how well they are maintaining constant vigilance in their daily lives. Even making statues for worship was surrounded by careful rituals. One ancient text describes how to properly cut the wood for a sacred statue. At sunrise, you shall go to the forest. Bring a golden axe and a silver saw. Purify the ground with incense, fire, and holy water. Set up a folding table, sacrifice a sheep, and offer its best parts. Scatter dates and fine meal, and place a cake made with syrup and butter. Pour out beer as an offering. Then kneel and stand before the cornel tree, reciting the incantation, "Evil is the broad step." With your golden axe and silver saw, touch tree and cut it down with a hatchet. Sprinkle the fallen wood with water, gather the offerings, kneel again, and break the tree into pieces. Such detailed rituals shows just how seriously the Mesopotamians took their connection to the divine, and how much they feared upsetting the balance between gods, spirits, and the living. After carefully choosing and cutting the sacred wood, the next step was to carve the statues. The statues were shaped as if they wore their own garments, holding a cornel stick. A cornel stick was symbolized as special stick. This stick was represented as burnt from both ends, in their right hand and clasping their chest with their left hand in a gesture of devotion. Once the carving was finished, the artist would write his name on the statues, marking them with personal responsibility and care. The rituals didn't end here. Before keeping the statue at the temple, they were first brought home to perform another important purification ritual. At home, the statues were placed on pedestals in a way that made them look like they were walking forward. It was a symbolic pose, which means it will remove all evil forces of the house. The artist then had to touch different parts of the house while reciting incantations and performing other sacred acts to cleanse the space. And when finally these statues are placed inside temples, they create a powerful spiritual environment with purity, peace, and a sense of security. The eyes of the statues were wide and intense. The reason behind this were to form a direct, unblinking connection between the human world and the divine realm. Worshippers would come and can seek answers through their gaze into those wide and intense eyes, hoping for signs or blessings. Meanwhile, the silent will of the gods would flow back through the statues, which was believed to be interpreted and spoken aloud by the priests. This sacred exchange of prayers and divine messages reached its highest and grandest form in the towering temples known as ziggurats, where heaven and earth seemed to meet. And so, from mighty kings and sacred temples to thousands of gods and elaborate rituals, the world of ancient Mesopotamia reveals a civilization shaped by power, faith, and deep devotion. Their beliefs were not just carved into statues or built into ziggurats. They were lived each day in the fields, in the cities, and in the hearts of the people.